Let's see. Okay, I believe we are live. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us for this live session on public speaking fundamentals. And our first item on our agenda today is introductions. So we're going to take turns to introduce ourselves in the beginning a little bit. So the thing is, in case you're muted, unmute yourself, share a little bit of your background, professional background, education, and especially in the area of your experience with Toastmasters or public speaking, maybe horror stories. That would be very interesting. So we're gonna try this. So starting with maybe Paula.
Hi, I'm Paula Gabriel. I'm a program manager currently working for a large medical company. I've been with the company a few years and I really enjoy the position and working with different teams and doing programming for a lot of different various teams. My educational background is I'm a graduate from West Virginia University. I went on to WCCC to obtain a microcomputer degree. It's a 2-year computer center degree. I also have my green belt for procurement from Villanova University Online, and I'm currently working with some different educational opportunities within our company to always try to improve myself. Um, I'm considered the Power Automate expert of our group, in which there is a certification that you can get from Microsoft to be an expert user. So I'm also looking into that. And with joining Toastmasters most recently, I found that although previously to this one particular meeting where it was just like a frozen moment in time, I've always felt like I was, a pretty good speaker in social situations or in, different business situations. But it happened to me twice now where I just froze up and the words didn't come out. So I feel like that Toastmasters would be a good place as a start. One of my friends is in Toastmaster and she has said nothing but rave reviews about it. So I want to be able to start from the, ground up with it and be able to learn the fundamentals and be able to learn from, people um, such as people in our group to be able to expand on, what we know and how we can do better. And when we share ideas, it's sharing knowledge. So I'm really happy to be back into Toastmasters and with people that have had similar struggles and have had similar experiences so that when the big moment comes and my boss says to me, Paula will update the group, I will be able to share my knowledge with the larger groups as well.
Wonderful, Paula. Well, if you're not speaking, could you mute yourself? I think I'm hearing a little bit of echo here and there, but yeah, Paul, I think that's why we're here today. So thanks for sharing your story. I didn't see any kind of hesitation or anything, so you did really well. Let's move on to Sam. Sam, introduce yourself.
Hi, everybody. My name is Sam. I my education is I got a bachelor's degree in industrial engineering, and I minored in supply chain management. And then right after that, I went to get a job in estimating engineering, which is what I am now. I'm an estimating engineer. Um, I was very nervous I wouldn't get this job because I didn't have any kind of internship or prior experience in engineering outside of having a degree. So that was definitely very scary. I was nervous about getting this job and very happy to accept it. Um, so yeah, and then I really am enjoying doing that. A couple of months into doing that, I realized am going to want to be in a situation where I can influence and negotiate and lead people, and influence people and negotiate with them and lead them in the direction that I want them to go. And the best way that I figured I could do that would be with Toastmasters. And I'm in a similar situation to Paula. I always sort of figured that I'm okay at speaking. Um, so why would I need to go to Toastmasters? But I realized after a while it's kind of difficult for me to land the plane whenever I am speaking. A lot of times I'll have a topic, and I'll be able to speak about that topic. It doesn't come to me beforehand. It comes to me as I'm speaking. So my impromptu, I can't think about what I'm saying. It just has to be said. Um, but then it becomes difficult. It's hard to shut off the water hose, I guess. So that's why I joined Toastmasters, and that's why I'm here right now. So thank you.
Thank you, Sam, and congratulations on your new job. And yeah,
Thank you. I was very nervous about it.
but with the Toastmasters training, I think yeah, you will excel. Definitely, I'm sure. While we were talking, a new guest, a seasoned Toastmaster, just joined our meeting. Emily, we're introducing ourselves a little bit professionally as well as our career as a Toastmaster. Emily?
I found Toast. Hello, everybody. Good to be here. It's kind of a miracle. I'm not the most tech savvy person in the world. So it was a challenge to get on here, but here I am. I had to improvise pretty much getting on here today because landing the plane is hard for me too, Sam. So anyway, I have been a professional storyteller, and then I became a Toastmasters, and because I wanted somebody when I moved to a new location to have a group to listen to my stories, and Toastmasters came up. So I went to a meeting and I met a lot of wonderful women. So I got a group of friends and a group of listeners for my stories. Then I got back into improv, and I have if you did the Venn diagram, you would have, I don't know what you'd have in the middle, but Toastmasters, storytelling, and improvisation all connect for me. So I'm becoming better at all three of them because I use the same skills in each of them to grow as a Toastmaster, as a storyteller, and as an improviser. Thank you.
Wow, that's exciting. And thank you for joining us.
You
And
bet.
you overcame the technology challenge, which could be, a monumental challenge.
Yes, it was.
So let me introduce myself just a little bit. I'm a college professor who, so it's kind of an oxymoron, right? So college professor who's struggling with public speaking, but uh, just like what Paula said, depending on the situation, and you could be a wonderful speaker, but if you're put in a different context, you could be struggling. So anybody out there, I think, could be a or become a better speaker, and that's one of the reasons why I joined Toastmasters a while ago. I started in 2001, but I had to stop because of my job moves. And then I resumed my Toastmasters career back in, I think it was 2000, probably 18 or 17. So it's been almost about 4 years now. And I've definitely come a long way. And Fred, who is my mentor, definitely can provide a testament, I guess, for that. But I'm really enjoying my life as a Toastmaster, and that's one of the reasons why I'm here. And our last guest to introduce himself is Fred.
Thank you, JR. If you can switch the cameras there.
Mhm.
You know, one of the things that you all have said that really resonates with me is the embarrassment and sometimes the brain freeze that happens when you get called unexpectedly. And this may be a surprise to some of you, probably surprise to JR because I've worked with him quite a while. I blush a lot. And it used to be when people would call on me to speak, I would turn as red as this shirt. And it got to the point where I actually had to drop out of a couple of groups because I got myself so lathered up. I got myself so psyched out that when I would walk into a meeting, I would start blushing. And it became, hey, this isn't going to work. And as you probably know, blushing is just the body's way of expressing the feelings. We can't suppress our emotions. And blushing is one way that our body expresses our emotions. And the emotion it was expressing was fear. And as I thought about it, what's really going on here? It's the fear of failure. I didn't want to fail. And when I thought about it and did a lot of soul searching on it, I realized the fear of failure, what's behind that is the fear of rejection. And so when I was blushing, my body was putting up the shields were going up. Ooh, I love that visual there. Ooh, I got to pay extra for that. I don't know.
It's like magic.
It was like magic, but I was putting up barriers and I thought I was hiding it, but my body betrayed me. My body betrayed me by blushing. I'm happy to report that having worked through and using Toastmasters as the therapy, the catharsis, I don't blush as often as I used to. And if people call on me, most of the time, I can handle it. So I'm just very excited that Toastmasters gives us a vehicle on which we can kind of do a little analysis to figure out what is it that I get so lathered up about. And all we're doing is talking. I mean, we talk all day long. Why is this such a big deal? I don't know, but it is a big deal. So I'm delighted that all of you are here, and I'd like to have you do an exercise, and you're going to need to come off the microphones because we don't have a chat box that we can readily use. But I'm going to hold up an object here in a second, and I want you to shout out exactly what it is I'm holding up, and then what it could be used for. What is it used for, and what could it be used for? So I'm holding up this device. As you can see, it's brass. It's probably about 6-7 inches long. It's a heavy sucker. What do you think this is? Shout it out.
Bolt.
A
Bolt.
bolt. Okay, what else is it?
It's a microphone at a steelworkers meeting.
I love that. What? She's on something here, folks. Come on, let's build on this. What
Is
else?
your house still standing?
What else is it?
It could give someone a real headache.
State Exhibit A, the murder weapon. Very good, Sam. What else is it?
I have an idea. It's a paperweight.
Yes. It says door stops for that door that keeps swinging back and forth. You put this little puppy in front. What else is it?
It's a potato masher. Mashed potatoes. Boy, phew. Couple.
And if you can mash potatoes, Paula, what else could you mash with this sucker? Tomatoes?
Yeah, maybe some vegetables.
Maybe nuts? A nutcracker.
Yeah.
Maybe we put our little seal on it and now it becomes a stamp.
Maybe you can do some exercises with that.
Yeah.
I am.
Like a dumbbell.
My workout for the day.
It's a telescope.
Eyepiece. Exactly.
Yes, for a pirate. For a pirate with no teeth. Because he tried to bite it once and yep, there went his teeth.
And you made the dentist day because now he's got $7,000 worth of dental work. Well, you get the idea. What we see here is that individually we came up with a few ideas. But together, we came up with a whole lot more. And we were able to leverage those ideas by collaboration, by communicating with one another. And what we do in Toastmasters is the same thing. We take a vehicle like our online curriculum and we use it as a launching platform, sort of like we did with this Bolt, to get into areas that we hadn't thought about, to explore and uncover and discover some new things. Maybe it's new content, new ideas, maybe it's information we're not aware of, or maybe we discover and uncover some things about ourselves, like, why is it I can't speak in public? What's holding me back? What's keeping me down when I really would like to express myself more freely, more openly, more communicatively? So we see the power of collaboration. We see the power of having a structured way of learning public speaking. And that's the real takeaway here. Public speaking can be mastered, and it's just a matter of learning a few tips, a few structures, and then practice, 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 practice. Woo-hoo! So that's what we're going to do now. But first, I think it might be helpful if we learned a little bit about Toastmasters itself. So I'm going to ask Dr. J if you could tell us a little bit about our founder and the organization called Toastmasters. Take it away, Dr. J.
Thank you, Fred. And I practiced this probably 3 times already, so it's great. Yeah, practice, practice, practice. Our founder is Dr. Ralph Smedley, and he joined this organization called, I mean, we're all very familiar with this organization called YMCA right out of college. Eventually became the vice president for education for the organization. But then he noticed that a lot of businessmen struggling with, especially public speaking. So he decided to offer some sessions during lunch times. And those sessions grew more popular. And he had an idea, which was to create an organization that's specializing in helping people become better public speakers. And that's really the beginning of Toastmasters. And I'm so glad and I feel so blessed that we have such an organization that could help us all overcome this, I guess, I know people use an analogy, dragon of fear eventually. So we're all working on it together. And I'm so glad to be part of it. Back to you, Fred.
Thank you, JR. Let's talk about the importance of communication. How important is it, do you think, to be able to communicate to large groups? Come off microphone and just throw out a few thoughts. Why or how is it important to be able to speak to large groups? What do you think?
Because from time to time, you're actually called on and you have to say something and you don't want to look stupid.
Great, great point. Fear of rejection. What other thoughts do you have?
Depends on the context. You know, if you want to be in a leadership role, you're going to have to be able to get your ideas across and get people to understand and believe and think that your ideas are worthwhile.
Mhm.
So let's drill down a little bit on that, Sam. That's a great point. Let's say that you're running for office and you have a real problem with ums and ahs and ers and ands and so forth. Does that make a difference?
It depends. If you're a likable person and people like you a lot and you get a lot of good press, ums and ahs aren't going to matter as much. But if people don't like you and they have to listen to your speech a lot, ums and ahs are definitely going to be more of a big deal.
Exactly right. What else? What other thoughts? Paula, Emily, any thoughts?
Speaking to that, I would like to add that. Oh, Paula, did you have something to say? Okay.
No, please go, Emily.
All right.
It's fine.
Well, what I wanted to say about Sam's is the likability, liking the speaker is very important because then you create a connection. But if there are two speakers who are vying for the same job, the same speaking engagement. The one who has learned to let go of those filler words, those ums and ands and so's, is going to be the one who will get the job. They're both likable, they're both dressed well, they're both have the chops to get across the message. But the one who gets it across with more polish is likely the one who's going to get the job.
Wonderful, Emily. I'm sorry to interrupt, but in the chat, so we have online audience too. So they're actually sending us some messages, and one of them said, "Get the buy-in on a project, Fred." And then another person said, "Influence people and bring them to a common ideology." That's what the second viewer said.
Well, thank you for that, JR, and thank you for those of us who are joining us live online through LinkedIn. We definitely want to have your input, so continue to jump in on the chat box. Let me just conclude here with a quick story, then I'll throw it over to JR. The importance of communicating to a large group. Some of you may know the name Caroline Kennedy. She was the only daughter of our President John F. Kennedy. A wonderful woman, very talented and so forth. But many years ago, she was nominated to be one of the ambassadors for our nation. When she was doing an interview with the New York Daily Post, this is a newspaper up in the New York City area, in a 30-minute interview, she used the words, you know, 200 times in 30 minutes. She was not confirmed by the U.S. Senate. She certainly had the credentials. She certainly had the name recognition. She certainly had the charm, the charisma, all those things. But as an ambassador, of course, you're doing a lot of public speaking. And when you're using, 200 times in 30 minutes, she was ineffective. So sadly, but prudently, the Senate said, maybe we need someone else to be our representative. So the impact of speaking confidently to large groups is important. JR, talk to us about the ability in other areas of speaking importance. Kind of lead us through a discussion on how it might impact us as individuals.
Yeah. Before I move on to that, I want to mention something about what you just said, and the importance of avoiding these crutch words. And the crutch word I'm working on right now is, I guess, and. So keep an eye on, how many times I use and, but at the same time, what's kind of strange is also once you start, paying more attention to these things, you hear them more and louder. And I hope I'm not going to be using ands too many times during the meeting today. Or I'm just encouraging people now to listen to me more carefully, I guess. But moving on to the next topic, why is speaking in public important? That is really the topic we want to discuss. And what is the impact of being able to speak in public effectively or ineffectively? So let's have a little bit of a conversation around that topic. Any volunteers?
I have an idea. I think that if you're able to speak effectively in public, well, I think that it gives the person a lot more credibility. And if they're able to throw a joke or two in or a smile, I think that adds to their likability factor. So when you put the whole package together, I feel like it really will increase your chances for success. If the public sector is you're running for office or if you're in a job, I just feel like when people know they can count on you to speak, regardless if the audience is, in the public or in a smaller setting, I think that it really increases your likelihood of, success.
Yeah, that's a Great answer. We do have couple comments online, and oh, I used and. I'm gonna read that a little bit. Colin says, "I'm making a list of words to avoid when speaking," which is a great strategy. She's also saying good ideas do not grow in a vacuum. So that's her comment. Anybody else to chime in?
I would definitely agree with Colleen on that. Good ideas definitely do not grow in a vacuum. An important part of the process of generating good ideas and getting your ideas across is bouncing them off back and forth with people and your colleagues. So, yes, definitely agree with you, Colleen, on that one.
Wonderful. Wonderful. If we don't have anybody else to chime in, let's move on to a story. So let me share this story, which is about GM plant in Southern California, and the plant was producing these cars. Buick. I used to have own a Buick when I was a college student, so it's kind of near and dear to me. GM, the brand. It hired 7,000 employees at one point, but the challenge there was the management people and the union people. They were speaking different languages and they couldn't really agree on anything. And eventually, the plant has to close just because of all this kind of miscommunication. Just like the Tower of Babel, is that true? Good analogy. And eventually, they decided to do something about it, and they worked with Toyota, and they were able to bring the plant back to operation by teaching the management people and the union how to communicate effectively with each other. And this is another point of, I guess, joining Toastmasters, because you learn how to effectively communicate with each other. Moving on to our next topic, and Fred's gonna give us a story.
Well, let's just talk about why is it that people struggle with speaking in public? I mean, what is the big issue? We know from the U.S. Institute of Mental Health, let's move kitty cat, that 70% of Americans suffer from the fear of speaking in public. In fact, they've created a name for it. It's called glossophobia. Glossophobia. Did you know they had a name for the fear of speaking in public? Glossophobia. And 70% of Americans suffer from it. In fact, some people say they fear speaking in public more than they do death. Now, that's pre-COVID. I think COVID is maybe a wake-up call. But regardless, why do you suppose people struggle with speaking in public? What's the big deal? You're just talking. We do that all the time. Why is it such a struggle? What do you think?
Yeah, I think, talked about this or touched on this just a little bit in the beginning. And I also mentioned this, but we all, I guess, have this kind of fear of public speaking. I mean, maybe from the time when we were born, but it takes some very purposeful efforts to overcome the efforts. Of course, there's some, I would say, lucky people out there who don't have to do that. Just like the people who can just play the piano without even learning how to play the piano. I don't know how that happens, but that's my thought.
Well, good thoughts on there. In the interest of time, because we want you all to take a chance here and do some talking, let me just wrap this up here by talking about Carol. Carol is a mother of young children, enjoying life. Things were going swimmingly well until one day during a routine medical check, the doctors discovered something that wasn't quite right. They did some testing, and oh my gosh, she had stage 2 cancer. So she jumped in with surgery, chemo, radiation, all those protocols, went through 2 years of trying to get on the mend. And the good news is she did get on the mend. She was back and her health was restored. Because she had such a difficult and challenging but a good story, she was asked to speak at a conference one time about her story. And when she was asked, she froze up solid. You want me to do what? She said, I'd rather go through another bout of chemo than to have to speak in public. Well, that was a bit shocking. So they asked her, well, if you don't mind, why is that? I mean, well, she said, with cancer, no one judges you. No one judges you. But once again, we hear that fear, that four-letter word, fear of failure, fear of rejection, that raises its ugly head. But we know that this dragon, JR mentioned, can be slayed. And one way to do that is through impromptu speaking, mastering some simple techniques on how to speak off the cuff. JR, can you give us some of those simple techniques? And then let's kind of practice this with our folks.
Sure. Before we move on, because a lot of times I think what happens when we have these online meetings is like forgetting about the online audience altogether. So I'm gonna be very mindful today to include the online audience. So there are a couple more questions. And by the way, if I'm not calling your name, that's because of my fear of butchering your name. So please understand. So we have an audience question, which is, why do leaders, I really like this question, by the way. Why do leaders use teleprompter? Is that considered public speaking? Maybe Emily or Fred can comment on this.
Oh. All right. Can I be heard now? Okay. That speakers often have a number of engagements in a day or a couple of days in a week. And if they're giving up to the moment presentations about things, it would be really difficult to have everything memorized, not memorized, but known, so with a good speech put together. Whereas the teleprompter, it with a good speaker, you almost can't tell when they're reading a teleprompter, but it's really necessary these days when there's so much information and all of it is so up to the minute that's why I think teleprompters are necessary for many speakers. And it improves their level of confidence because they know they're not going to be able to forget. And confidence is a big deal that we haven't discussed, but confidence is key in becoming a great speaker.
Yeah, I agree with you on the 100%. I use teleprompters a lot when I try to record a video just because, I mean, I want to deliver a certain message and I want to be using certain words for that. If I miss that, I may have to be recording the same video like 20 times.
Mhm.
So you're wasting a lot of time basically trying to remember what you want to say. But if you have a teleprompter in front of you, I mean, you sound like, you look like a very confident speaker without practicing maybe like 2 hours or without spending 2 hours to try to record a video. So I think in that sense, teleprompters are very effective. Yeah. Time savers. Any other ideas? Okay, so then I'm going to move on to the next question. So we talked about the fears, and one of the audiences said fear of mistakes. So yeah, that is, I guess, consistent with fear of rejection, fear of being judged, and those types of things. So I'm going to jump into our next segment where we talk about impromptu speaking, and also we practice impromptu speaking. But before we do that, let's talk a little bit about what impromptu speaking is. Impromptu speaking is speaking without any kind of preparation. I do play the piano. That's why I mentioned, playing the piano, but I'm not one of those lucky people who can play the piano from birth. So I had to spend a lot of time to pick up the skill. But just like the people playing like jazz music, you improvise as you go, that kind of thing, which is a challenge for me right now, but impromptu speaking is exactly like that. So you do your speeches without any kind of preparation, and people get really, I would say, uh, challenged by that. But we do this all the time, just like what Fred said earlier, because we have conversations and we don't have scripts whenever we have conversations. So we are very natural in terms of impromptu speaking. And a lot of times, if you have a certain model like introduction, body, or conclusion, I mean, it's really helpful because you have a structure and you just need to fill in the gaps. So let's try this now in practice. And Fred is going to lead the session, the first round.
So the first round is very simple. This is a softball question, and we're going to ask all of you to jump in if you would like. Come off the microphone, but just tell us anything about your first car. Your first car, some stories, what it is, how you got it, whatever you want to tell us about first cars. You'll have 90 seconds, and then we'll start waving, and that might be a hint to land the plane and let somebody else have a chance. So someone jump in and take it away.
So, speaking of landing planes, my car is a Honda Pilot. It's a purple Honda Pilot, and my sister, this is my first car. My sister came up with a great name for him, and his name is Charlie, after Charles Lindbergh, the first pilot. So she came up with a great name for him. He's an '09 Honda Pilot, so I actually even grew up in that car, and then my dad gave it to me when I moved away. Unfortunately, Charlie is getting there. He's getting to the end of his life. He's starting to make a lot of weird noises, so that's starting to be a little stressful for Charlie and for me. I don't want to have Charlie have a bad rest of his life, so I'm gonna be looking into and trying to take care of what's wrong with him. He's starting to have a lot of weird noises, and hopefully I'll be able to do some of the figuring it out myself. There's definitely a lot of complexity in cars, but I work with making car parts, so I should be able to figure it out and make it work. So yeah, that's how Charlie's doing right now. Thank you.
Thanks, Sam. Someone else jump in.
Hi, my first car that I can remember, it was a Toyota Supra. And I don't even know if they make the Toyota Supra anymore, but I was such a saver as a young person, where I would work and save and work and save and work and save. Like, to get me to spend anything back in the day was like, it had to be something big. So I saved a lot of money to get this nice shiny Toyota Supra, and I was really proud of myself. It was white, it was shiny, it was like a sports car. So driving down the road, I felt like $1 million in this car. And ever since I had that Toyota Supra, I really love Toyotas. So recently, Toyota announced that they came out with a 2022 crossover, in which I can't believe it. Like, this is a dream come true, because I've always been a Toyota Corolla lover. Many people in my family have a Toyota Corolla, and different colors. You know, one might have blue or burgundy, but just this Corolla, and a couple people have the Camry. But I am telling you, I'm going to have to really do some more research on this Toyota crossover, because it has everything that I want in a car. And I'm for sure the guys on the call would be able to talk more mechanically on the side, but it's all-wheel drive. It has room. The inside is amazing. It has all the features and the number one feature is I'm going to be able to go into any shopping area or any, busy, heavy populated area, and I'll be able to just take this crossover and just whip it into the parking spot. And I don't have to worry about will it fit? Am I going to door somebody when I open up my door? It has everything. Compact. Okay. Thank you.
That's fabulous, fabulous. And it's nice when you can fit into a parking spot, you know. That Pilot's a nice car, but man, you can't pick any just spot. You gotta watch where you're picking. Emily, tell us your story.
Back in the day, I was driving a Plymouth Valiant, a gold Plymouth Valiant that my mother had for about a year, and then she decided she wanted something else. So I got that car. At the time, I was living in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and didn't need air conditioning. And I drove that car around Pittsburgh, not a thought about air conditioning. But 5 years later, I moved to Florida. Air conditioning. Well, this was a basic model of the Plymouth Valiant, and this car was great. Never had a day's problem, just routine maintenance, oil changes. It was a wonderful car. It had very little personality to anybody else, but I loved this car, and I named it Prince Valiant. Moved down drove it down to Florida on my own, felt very safe and secure in this car. But now I was living in Florida with a car that had no air conditioning. And the summers were really hot. But I wasn't making a lot of money, so I really couldn't afford to get a new car. So for 9 years, I drove that car in Florida without air conditioning. I had gotten a job in the film business, and when I drove into the back lot one day, somebody came up to the front of the car and stopped me. He said, "That's exactly the car we're looking for. We need that car." Well, that car, I want to tell you, had a great long life. And at the end of that car's life, Prince Valiant was blown up in a scene in a movie and had a great ending for a prince. That was my first car.
Wonderful.
That's priceless, Emily. Thank you for sharing. JR, what comments are we seeing in the chat box? And then let's start wrapping this thing up because the clock is moving on.
Sure. Yeah. One more comment is, how well do we have to know the subject matter to be confidently speaking to large audiences about the subject?
What do y'all think?
I think it is important to have knowledge because let's say I am a college professor. If I don't prepare and show up for my lecture, I will look stupid. Yes. So it's important to have the knowledge, I think.
Yeah, and another point might be that after you're done speaking on a particular subject, I think that the odds of getting questions from the team would be pretty high. Somebody usually asks a question about the subject matter, so I think the more preparation, the better. Or if you're on a large call and you know that someone else in the group has more knowledge on the particular question, you can kind of say, "Oh, well, I know that Emily is on the call today, for example, and she could more specifically answer your question." But that's been in my experience.
Well, JR, let's jump right into some ideas about how we move forward from here. What are some of the next logical steps for us? What do you think?
Thank you, Fred. And this is kind of an impromptu speech because I think we're changing our sequence a little bit here. So we're talking about what's coming after this session. Is that true? Yeah. Okay. And I am prepared for that. So let me talk about it a little bit. So we are going to have a full-blown Speechcraft workshop, which is going to be lasting. Right now, we spent altogether 45 minutes together. However, in this workshop, more extended workshop, we'll be spending 2 hours each. So we'll be spending 2 Saturdays from, let's see, I'm trying to see the time. I think it was 8 to 10, 8 to 10 every Saturday for 2 times. So the first day will be February 12th. And then the second date will be February 26th. And we're not going to be using StreamYard. We're not going to be broadcasting this for 2 hours, but we'll have our own private sessions over Zoom. But if you're interested, please sign up by letting me know. You all know my LinkedIn profile. So you just need to message me or send me a text and just tell me that you're interested. Fred, have I forgotten anything?
Well, there's no cost to this, and it's just going to be 2 sessions. So depending upon the number of people that we have, it may take 2 hours. It may only take an hour and a half. But essentially what we're going to do is we're going to work through the Toastmasters curriculum on Speechcraft Foundations. It's the basic of how to speak in public. So we're going to talk about things like, well, how do you pick a topic? How do I open a speech? I got this idea, but how do I open? Well, there's 5 time-tested techniques. We'll go over those. Things like startling question, ask a question, story, or whatever. We're going to get into how do you develop your main points. And of course, the most effective way to communicate people is to intellectually challenge them, but emotionally stir their hearts, play with their heartstrings. So if you can combine the heart and the brain, if you can connect the cognitive with the affective domains, you really struck a home run. And the most effective way to do that, quite frankly, is storytelling, improv, all very good stuff. So we're going to go over that. And the cool thing is it's very hands-on. So we'll throw out a couple ideas and then we'll practice. It's going to be a very small group. We might have 5 people. We might have 7 people. So again, it's just going to be us having some fun with it, and we'll see where it goes. So we're looking at doing it 2 Saturdays, as JR suggested, February 12th and 26th from 8 to 10 via Zoom. So let's have you all Zoom in, have some fun. Reactions, questions, comments?
Well, February 26th is my birthday, so this would be like a birthday present to myself
Oh, wow.
if I could possibly speak better. Just want to throw that out there, guys.
I mean, I can feel that you're taking this really seriously, which is wonderful.
So JR, any comments from the online community? Any interest there?
Yeah, we do have one more comment, and Colin says, "Please reserve me a seat." So we definitely have at least one person who wants to join us over the Zoom session. Colin, thank you so much for your interest.
I have a question.
Sure.
Is there the 8 to 10, what time zone is that?
Oh, that's a great question. It's going to be the Eastern time zone. So it could be challenging for people, joining us from another time zone. Like, let's say if it's 8 a.m., it could be, I would say, 5 a.m. in the West Coast. So we may have to adjust our time a little bit. But if something changes, I'm going to be posting that information on through my LinkedIn account. So please stay tuned. But Emily, that was a very great point to be made. Yeah.
So let's ask Colleen what time zone she's in.
Oh yeah, Colin, can you type in the time zone you belong to? She could well be in the Eastern time zone, but I don't know. Yeah. So it's taking some time, but I guess we can have a conversation offline in this case, so we can probably move on Fred.
So let's just kind of wrap this up, telling you about a story from Debbie Fields. You all know Debbie Fields because you see in the mall Mrs. Fields Cookies. She started her business back in 1977. She just had this great idea. She had a great recipe for chocolate chip cookies. Well, the next thing you know, it took off. I mean, it got to the point where she had 650 franchises across the world. She sold the business to 20 plus years later for $400 million. Oh my. And she was often asked to speak about her experience. Now, this is a woman who characterized herself as the original Energizer Bunny. She loved life, she loved what she was doing, but she had a fear of speaking. Well, believe it or not, this woman who was a self made multimillionaire joined the Toastmasters Club in Salt Lake City. And she was a member there for several years. And the reason she did that, she said, I want to get comfortable because I'm always being asked and I always get worked up, always get lathered up about having to speak. And she said the curriculum in Toastmasters was simple, it was logical, and it worked for me. And today I feel so much better. I'm so much more confident. I'm really grateful for Toastmasters and what it's done for me and what I see it doing for others. Folks, that can be you. Some of you are already in Toastmasters, but those of you perhaps have not really explored it. It's a time-tested method. We're coming up on our 100th year anniversary. It's very affordable, $45 every 6 months. And it's a great way to just explore and to slay that dragon of fear, the dragon of failure, the dragon of rejection. We'll talk more about that when we get talking on there. But regardless, we're all delighted that you all joined us together, and thank you for doing that. JR, why don't you give us a few final thoughts, and we'll call this a wrap.
Yeah, thank you so much, Fred. And I'm really, I guess now sorry that I didn't really emphasize this idea of no cost workshop. So please remember, we're not charging you or anything. But as you saw during our session today, you would have wonderful time. You will have wonderful time together with us. It will be really based on hands-on training, which I emphasize when I'm teaching my students. My area is cybersecurity, but I think the same thing is really effective if, I mean, especially in public speaking, because you will have to be able to speak eventually out there in public. But that's all I have, and we could probably wrap up our session today right here right now. Anybody else, any thoughts to share? Okay, we'll stop our broadcast now, but you could still remain, but I can just stop the session. Okay.